Alright, turns out the Eagles kept another safety visit quiet, but now that it's out there, how early will the Birds go to bolster that position? Granted, with so many options to choose from, one analyst leaked a report suggesting Philly might take an underrated edge in the first round, which, let's just say, upset quite a bit of people. So let's get into why that is and why everyone needs to calm down just a bit. Plus, Vic Fangio revealed he'll be an Eagle for life, Cam Jurgens' new contract means more than you realize, and what Jalen Hurts is doing can't be comforting for the rest of the league. So let's talk about it. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? So before we jump into the draft and go over some last-minute prep and details, let's just start out with a big congratulations to Jalen Hurts and his new bride, Bree Burrows, as QB1 revealed in an interview with Men's Health that him and his longtime girlfriend are now married, meaning Mr. Breed of One just got 2 rings in the span of like 3 months, which he totally deserves, by the way, but honestly, just reaching the pinnacle has only lit the fire even more, with Jalen's trainer Taylor Kelly saying he throws about 120 balls a week during the offseason to keep his arm fresh, and that their main focus has been fine-tuning his mechanics, footwork, shoulder mobility, and strength. Now, on one hand, you might say, okay, cool, that's good, whatever, except like you've heard practically since Jalen became a Super Bowl champion, getting the taste is the worst thing that could have happened for the rest of the league.
He was just on the field last week. When a guy shows up after winning the Super Bowl and he is focused on little details, I'm talking little details to enhance things by fractions of the second. When you take that approach after reaching the pinnacle, that's that like... And I don't want to like say it too soon or anything like that, but I think when I think of like the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, those type guys, that had to be their approach. Like, okay, I got to the summit. I want to do it again, but I'm not going to go as the same player. I'm going to try to do it again as even a better player. And that's the approach that I've seen him take this offseason.
What's an example of what the little things that he's worked on? A
little arm path thing to get the ball out just a titch sooner. You don't need it in all your throws, but if you can have that here or there, and that can be the difference in, and that may only be like 2 to 3 completions over a 2 to 3 game span. But what if those are on critical third downs in the fourth quarter? What if that's the difference maker? That's where I believe his mindset is at. And so it's cool, it's cool to see that. You would not know standing out on the field that the approach is any different from a season where you might have felt like, man, that didn't go like we want. We need to be pedal to the metal. We need to be doing everything we can. There's not a different approach now that he's won the Super Bowl. It's the same approach.
Yeah, just go ahead and mark me down for this prediction, but Jalen Hurts is going to win multiple Super Bowls in his career. Of course, remember, if you want a chance to win a signed jersey from his first Super Bowl victory, then you have one last chance to get entered in this video by hitting the like button and then going down to the comments section and typing in Breed of One. I mentioned it a couple times, but I'll be spinning for that one and this signed Cooper DeJean helmet during the draft stream. So again, get entered, make sure to the like button, go comment Breed of One, and then of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel. By the way, going back to Jalen real quick, the fact that he's fine-tuning his technique for that extra 1% is just GOAT stuff. Seriously, Mike Locksley, who worked with Hurts at Alabama, shared that QB1 is literally putting together game plans in his mind already, with the reason being that Jalen's basically taking a look at it and saying these are the defensive structures that beat him a year ago, along with the blitzes that gave him issues, and also the throws that he's missed so that he can end up hitting them the next time. I mean, come on, you got a dude who's a Super Bowl champ and MVP approaching it as if every day somebody's trying to take his job. Granted, okay, yeah, that's kind of true, but not every quarterback is putting in this type of work along with this type of focus this early in the offseason. However, I suppose when you're one of the main icons of the Jordan brand and had a dinner with Michael Jordan back in March, it's understandable that you'd come out of it with a crazy drive. Yet you know what the crazy part to me is? That some people were actually huge doubters of Hurts prior to winning the Super Bowl, or I guess technically there's still some out there. Regardless though, let them keep doubting because we got a team full of selfless players that are willing to put it all on the line, and that starts with QB1. But speaking of putting it all on the line, Cam Jurgens 100% did that during the postseason and was rewarded handsomely for it. Yeah, you're definitely well aware by now, but Philly has their beef jerky locked up through 2029 after offering him a 4-year, $68 million extension along with $39.4 million of that guaranteed, which for those who may have missed it, that is the most guaranteed money for any center in the league. So congrats to Cam because he's going to be eating good.
What I said was, give me all the bacon and eggs you have. Do you understand?
Okay, Cam may not have to worry about portion control being an offensive lineman, but for us mere mortals, there's thankfully some other realistic options out there, which is why I want to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, Factor Meals. Because I've mentioned them in the past, but there's not a better time to get signed up and start eating healthy meals that take as little as 2 minutes to prep. I mean, I got started because of that exact reason, because I just hardly have any time. But obviously, eating healthy is important, and with my goals to get in better shape this offseason, I started using Factor. Seriously, with their 2-minute meals, I'm able to fuel up fast with restaurant-quality meals that are ready to heat and eat whenever I am. And they've also made a huge difference when it comes to eating healthy, while also not having to take all day to figure out what's on the menu. Now, as I've mentioned in the past, my biggest hesitations were if these meals would taste good and then also if the cost would be worth it. But I gotta say, they're much better than I expected, and after doing the math, Factor's less expensive than takeout. Plus, every meal is dietitian approved, and the other added benefit is they offer dessert options like ice cream, breakfast options, and even have routine smoothies. Or if you're into juices, we've been going with their signature juice pack, and I would highly recommend. Of course, for those wondering, my favorite was the carrot, orange, ginger option, but they all taste great. So go ahead, get some time back and save money while eating healthy. Just head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50PhillySpecial to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. Again, that's code 50PhillySpecial at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, come on, how great is it to go from 13 years of Jason Kelce in the middle to the successor in Cam Jurgens earning Pro Bowl honors in his first season as a starter at center?
I got no words. This place is so special. Look at this place. It's rocking. I love this city.
It's like the message gets clearer and clearer the more time goes on. If you put in the work and you play well, then Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie are going to make sure that you get paid and get what you deserve. After all, hardly any teams would have re-upped Saquon Barkley's contract 2 years early. But after what he did this past year, sometimes it's more than just business. Now, for the business side, however, the short-term impact for Jurgens' extension frees up about $3.3 million in cap space for this year. So not anything massive, but the long-term ramifications are significant. I mean, think about it. You have 4/5 of your offensive line locked up through 2028. And not only that, but when you start to look at the core of players locked up through 2028, you got Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, and Zach Bond, along with Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean as certainties to be there as well. FYI, in case you weren't counting those exact numbers, that is 13 starters that you feel really good about for at least the next 3 to 4 years. And heck, that doesn't even include the rookies that Howie's going to add this year. However, before we get into some of those updates and specifics there, I did want to bring up the topic of Cam Jurgens' back injury since several of you had asked about it in the previous video. Okay, so first off, I'm pretty positive that at least the vast majority of us probably came to this conclusion anyway. And that is the Eagles wouldn't have offered anything close to the most guaranteed money if there were legit concerns about Jurgens' back. But for those who'd like to hear it from the man himself, he is good to go.
Still a process, whenever you get surgery, it takes a little bit to get through the rehab process and get back to it. So still going through that. But man, I feel like a new man. I feel so much better going through the playoffs and dealing with that pain. I'm sure a lot of people have dealt with that before, and it's not fun. But when you're going through the playoffs, and I'm not really concerned about me, I'm kind of concerned about what I can do to help the team and do everything I can and to win. When you're playing for a Super Bowl, that's going to last forever. Back pain's going to last however long it wants to last, but, I'm going to be a Super Bowl champ forever, and, I get to be with the Eagles for a long time, and, I'm looking forward to making a full recovery. Not really worried about if it's going to last through the season. I feel really confident with where I'm at right now and where it's going to be, and, yeah, I feel so much better than where it was, that's for sure.
By the way, I just love these, but another wild stat for you. Jeff Stoutland has coached the Eagles since 2013, or O-line coach since 2013, and the Eagles have drafted 13 offensive linemen. And shout out to Zach Berman, but between those 13 guys, they've either earned or are currently under contract for a combined $691 million. The crazy part is that doesn't even count free agents like Brandon Brooks or Mekhi Becton. Granted, like Zach also pointed out, the fact that 4 of your 5 linemen are on massive contracts makes it even that much more realistic why the right guard will be on a rookie contract. Now, personally, I'm believing in Tyler Steen because of the reasons I brought up a second ago about being drafted, and honestly, Mean Steen was set to be the starter before he got injured, and then, Mekhi Becton ran away with the job, and the rest is history. But it's time. Give Steen the chance to win the job again, and also, who knows, if Kenyon Green turns out, also you got Trevor Keegan, let them work with Jeff Stoutland, you should be okay. Look, you could also draft a guy on the O-line as well, yet considering other areas for need and how Stout can turn projects into starters, I'd lean defense at least early in the draft, especially after what we saw Vic Fangio do for Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and Jalix Hunt. I think we all would have admit rookies matter beforehand, but it's hard to have envisioned quite the type of impact those dudes made in their first year. And okay, sure, this year we're talking about pick 32, so not near as close or in terms of the past couple seasons, but still, they could make an impact. Yet when it comes to Philly's uncertainty around Dallas Goedert and the tight end situation, it's hard not to wonder if draft expert Daniel Jeremiah was referring to Howie Roseman here.
I was on with it. Well, I'll tell you afterwards, but with one of the better GMs in the league, and we were going through guys, and it was like you start getting to the end of the round, you start looking at names, and it's like I know exactly what I'm buying with Mason Taylor. Like the rest of these guys, it's some hit and miss, and he's like I know exactly who and what he is. So we'll see.
We will see, but even with me being a Mason Taylor fan, I'm not necessarily sure that I see it happening, or at least not in the first round. After all, and as a reminder, the Eagles have only taken one player since 2022 that didn't have a score of 8 or higher on their relative athletic score, and when it comes to top 30 visits, all of their first 3 picks in the last 2 seasons have been guys who came in for a visit to get more information on. So considering Taylor never had a reported top 30 visit, it feels much less likely that's a move we'll see. Although like I've talked about in previous videos, if we go based off that same analogy there, then the model doesn't work for Malaki Starks because, he wasn't an 8 on the relative athletic score, so, you kind of go both ways there, and I am a fan of Malaki Starks. I'm a fan of both those guys. It just doesn't seem like it adds up based on recent or current trends. So does Howie buck the trend there? Possibly. Yet either way, and probably not surprisingly, Malaki Starks is a guy Daniel Jeremiah would also definitely keep an eye on.
He's a really, really good player who I think there's better ahead of him. I don't think he made as many plays this year as he did previously, but he gives you someone who in a pinch can play your nickel. I think he could survive outside at corner if he had to get out of a game. And I think he could be an outstanding, free safety, play over the top, roam and make plays. He's young. He's really, really well-liked in that building in terms of the leadership, character, and tangible side of things. So, yeah, that's I think that would be from a value standpoint and a fit standpoint would be great. It's just that, I think the Eagles, given their druthers, would rather, they always like to start big. So, to me, if it's closely graded and there's an opportunity for them to get somebody on the line of scrimmage, I would think they would lean in that direction. But, if they got wiped out and cleaned up on the offense and defensive line, man, he'd be a great fit.
Like I said, I would love Starks as a pick for Philly, but even Daniel Jeremiah there said that's after Philly basically loses out on O-line options and D-line options to take a safety. Because, come on, we know just how much the trenches mean to Howie, and there's not really a limit.
You think we need one more? All right, we'll get one more.
Hypothetically speaking, if we're sticking to this notion of top 30 visits and relative athletic score, then Oluwafemi Oladejo is certainly a possibility at edge. I know, first round might seem high if you're looking at recent mock drafts, but draft analyst Tony Pauling reported that Oladejo could be a target at 32. With him saying, based on recent conversations, the general consensus is that the UCLA Edge gets taken around the 30 to 45 range. And therefore, again, that the Birds at 32 are a very strong possibility.
No, don't like that.
I get it. Heck, every mock draft that I've done over the last week or even several weeks has him in the 3rd round, so yeah, a first-round grade or a first-round pick there feels like a reach. Although personally, I will say I'd be okay with it, because it means Vic Fangio sees something in him and feels like he's worth a pick there. I don't know, maybe it's just all smokescreen and distraction to drive the pick up? However, one thing that isn't a smokescreen is hearing the DC tell the governor about what made him join the Eagles and why he'll be retiring in Philadelphia whenever he decides to call it quits.
Actually, I called him and Nick first because I knew I was going to be leaving there, and they knew they were looking for a new defensive coordinator, so the timing matched up, and they didn't believe it at first. And I said, no, this could happen, so they were excited. I was excited.
Yeah.
I was excited to get back. I like the people within the Eagles organization, Howie and Nick, Jeffrey. But going back to where it all started, too, because, I grew up a Philadelphia fan in all sports.
Yep.
And actually worked for the Philadelphia Stars back in 1984,
right.
The old USFL.
Sure.
I don't know if you remember that.
I sure as heck do.
And
watching them at the vet.
At the vet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, where it all started for me in pro football, that's where it's going to end, and I was excited about that.
I don't think that's a huge surprise, but also you can't overstate how important that is. Now, I know we continue to have the same conversation about a revolving door for the offensive coordinator. But much like we talk about Jeff Stoutland and the magic of the O-line room, Vic Fangio is the same way for the defense. So sure, I have my favorites in terms of prospects I want the Birds to draft, but honestly, regardless of who's taken defensively, I will 100% be confident in Fangio's blessing.
I never doubted you for a second.
By the way, that's not to say that he or Howie couldn't be wrong, but come on, at this point, they've certainly earned the benefit of the doubt. Now, as for more official draft news and visits, the Eagles did manage to meet with Penn State safety Kevin Winston Jr., according to Tim McManus, meaning he's a very realistic potential, but most likely for a second-round option. Again, this is a dude who's 6'1", 215 pounds, and led the Nittany Lions in tackles in 2023. And like we've talked about in the past, Winston could have potentially been the top safety off the board had he not suffered the knee injury last season. And here's the beauty. Thanks to the visit, the Birds will have gotten their doctors to take a look at him, make sure there's no concerns with the knee, and be all good to go. I mean, regardless of whether it's Malaki Starks in the first or we have Kevin Winston Jr. in the second, heck, you could even have Andrew Mukuba, it feels like we're going to get a safety taken early. Granted, if you go with Adam Schefter's report of being more likely for Howie to trade for a veteran player than to trade up in the first round of the draft, then that probably puts Starks out of the running. Of course, personally, I'm not exactly buying that notion because, again, it's like, okay, why on earth would Howie be broadcasting that to a reporter to say, like, I'm going to potentially go for a veteran? I mean, who in the building is leaking secrets to Adam Schefter? Feels like it's probably more of a distraction there, but nonetheless, Shefty says more than likely go to veterans than trade up, so I guess we'll see. Plus, let's just say this, Howie's even said he doesn't have 32 first-round grades on his board, and we've seen in past years that the GM isn't afraid to move up quick if his guy is close to being selected.
What has Howie done his entire career? He's zigged when everyone else is zagged, and he's going to be able to see if we have a premier player start to slip. Man, they're armed. They're armed and ready to go. So, I'm sure we'll get to it because we always talk about what we think could happen there and what the predictions might be. It's impossible to make a prediction of who's going to be there at 32, but I will make a prediction. Like if for some reason people overthink Jalon Walker like they overthought Nolan Smith and, he's not big enough and the size, like if he starts to drift and drop, I'm like, oh my gosh, they could just go do the exact same thing all over again.
But I am curious, are you buying or selling Schefter's report as being legit? I guess if you are buying it, then what veteran do you see Philly targeting and trying to trade for? Disclaimer here, Schefter was more so talking about like a mid-tier type of acquisition, so forget about Trey Hendrickson, forget about a Micah Parsons, just crazy trade scenarios. The salary cap does not work there, so I'll continue to push maybe a Kayvon Thibodeau from the Giants. That would at least be my preference for the move to make. However, I also don't exactly see New York being willing to help make the Eagles stronger after they inadvertently did that last season in Saquon. Yet when you're looking at safeties, I know people continue to throw out options like Budda Baker or Cameron Curl or heck even Tyrann Mathieu from the Saints. And on one hand, at just $4 million in guaranteed money, Mathieu could make some sense. Because at 33 years old, Honey Badger probably has another season in him that could help fill the gap in the secondary. Or at a bare minimum, be that veteran presence to help the young guys grow. Although I'll just say this, if we're going to look to add a veteran in there, then why don't we just sign Justin Simmons? Like, come on, you practically get a player with the same level of production, if not better, who's younger, who has played with Vic Fangio, knows the system, and you don't have to give up this year's draft capital for it. Look, I know, it's a million hypotheticals at this point, and I'm so ready for the draft to be here so that we can get some legit action. Still, I will reiterate to keep an eye on tight end and or what happens with Dallas Goedert. Because if the Eagles select a tight end early or Dallas Goedert is traded or vice versa, then the next move is going to follow it. And you never know what the Indianapolis Colts might do, especially with head coach Shane Steichen admitting that the team would like to add a pass-catching tight end. Granted, he said the preference is via the draft, yet maybe Steichen can be enticed for a reunion with his former tight end. Anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts on all this, and also a reminder again, but we will be streaming during the draft, so make sure to subscribe, turn the notifications on, and come hang out because the giveaways are going to be crazy and you're not going to want to miss out. As always, do me a favor and hit the like button on your way out, and I'll see you on draft night. This has been the Philly Special.